Look into her eyes. Look into the battle that lay deep within her. She is a story of many people fighting for the same cause. Equality isn't handed to you, and she was required to be, like many females before her, a mother, a caregiver, a sister, and a daughter. Inside her mind, there is a key. The key to knowledge and improvement for all lives all over the world. She can become someone great. And this ability is thanks to some amazing women and their fight for women's rights. July 18th of 1848 marked the first day that the movement began. On this day, a woman named Elizabeth Cady Stanton went out for tea with her friends, and little did she know that this outing would change her life and women's lives forever. During this outing, Stanton and her friends discussed how unfair women were being treated in society.
I stirred myself as well as the rest of the party to do and dare anything.
Within 2 days, they set up a convention that expressed their displeasure. They called it a convention to discuss the social, civil, and religious conditions and rights of women. During the convention, a document was drafted to be identical to that of the Declaration of Independence. This was known as the Declaration of Sentiments.
The natural rights of women are co-equal with those of men. So God created man in his own image. There is not one particle of difference intimated as exists between them. Why not allow those who have not become happy wives and mothers?
The Declaration of Sentiments discussed all the issues associated with men overpowering women in society. It addressed the issues of how women were legally dead in the eyes of the law, that women were prohibited from voting, and that women were forced into submitting to laws that they had no voice in. The Declaration also addressed how women had no property rights, and how men had so much control and responsibility over their wives that they could imprison or beat them. Divorce and child custody laws also favored men instead of women, giving them no rights. Women were also forced to pay property taxes, although they had no representation in the levying of these taxes. Most businesses refused to hire women, and if women did work, they were only paid a fraction of what men were paid. Professions such as medicine or law were also prohibited to women because they had no access to an education, since women were not allowed to go to college or a university. Women were also prohibited from participating in many church activities and were robbed of their self-confidence and their self-respect.
It's a fair chance with men to do all they can do with propriety. Though they may be educated of a higher order, women must be educated to be married as a chief end of their being. Their alternatives are few.
The Convention's Declaration of Sentiments received unanimous endorsements. However, the only resolution that was not accepted was women's enfranchisement, or the women's rights to vote. Stanton knew that the battle would be difficult, but she also knew that the negativity that would be received would only fuel the fire for equality.
Women folks have just passed a sort of Bill of Rights. Shocking and unnatural monstrous injury to all mankind.
The negativity received caused many women to remove their signatures from the Declaration of Sentiments, but most withstood their ground. Soon, people from all over the country started to become involved in this crusade in political education. Through the next 72 years, women like Lucy Stone, Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Lucretia Mott became involved by organizing more conventions and giving lectures. Each convention brought new ideas and new resolutions to the movement. During the Civil War, the women's rights movement slowed almost to a halt. When the war was over, Congress would pass the 14th and the 15th Amendment. The 14th Amendment, passed in 1868, stated that the Constitution extends to all citizens. However, it defines citizens distinctly as male. The 15th Amendment, passed in 1870, gave black males the right to vote. This angered the women, and many teamed up with white racist Southerners to prove to lawmakers that they deserved universal suffrage. They argued that their votes would cancel out those of the black males. Those who did not support in taking away the black man's rights to vote formed a separate faction known as the American Women's Suffrage Association. This is where the movement split into two organizations, the National Women's Suffrage Association and the American Women's Suffrage Association. Historical women include Esther Morris, the first woman to hold a judicial position and led the first successful state campaign for women's suffrage in 1869. Abigail Scott Duniway, leader of the successful fight in Oregon and in Washington in the early 1900s. Ida B. Wells Barnett and Mary Church Terrell, organizers of thousands of African American women who fought for suffrage for all women. Harriet Stanton Blatch, Elizabeth Cady Stanton's daughter, and Alice Stone Blackwell, Lucy Stone's daughter, carried on their mother's legacy into the next generation. And Anna Howard Shaw and Carrie Chapman Catt led the National American Women's Suffrage Association to their final success in the 20th century. Victory soon appeared on the horizon in 1910, with Western states giving women the right to vote. However, the movement would slow again during World War I and World War II. This would only benefit the women. During World War I, women would involve themselves in manufacturing and doing the work that was originally believed to be a man's job. On August 18th of 1920, women would finally gain the right to vote with the ratification of the 19th Amendment. However, this was just step one for equality. In 1923, a woman named Alice Paul would take charge of the National Women's Party. She took the next step for equality and drafted the very first Equal Rights Amendment. This, if passed by Congress, would be ratified into the Constitution, giving equality to men and women all over the nation, regardless of who they were. The Equal Rights Amendment would be passed. However, less than half the states would ratify it, and it would die out in 1982. Success was still prominent for the movement. With Title VII barring discrimination based on race and sex, the National Women's Association was formed and worked to end harassment in the workplace. Also, California became the first state in 1969 to pass no-fault divorce laws, which would be passed by all states by 1985. As the nation slowly began to accept women as equal individuals, many women's rights organizations helped to form rape hotlines, women's shelters, and helped to form child care centers for working mothers, as well as helped to create better education for boys and girls alike. Soon, Eleanor Roosevelt would be named chairwoman of a commission by President JFK on the status of women and would help to document discrimination against women in every area of American life. This would cause state and local governments to commission research committees to find and make changes within their communities to protect women's equality. Acts were passed to help women and their organizations protect their new rights. A few were the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which prohibits discrimination in credit practices; the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, which protects a woman's right to have a job whether or not she is pregnant, and she cannot take maternity leave if she is still able to work; and the Violence Against Women Act, which enforces federal punishment for rapists, domestic violence abusers, and sex offenders. Women are still fighting for equality to this day. However, we are all much closer to this goal than ever before, thanks to those involved in the women's rights movement. With the third wave of the women's rights movement beginning in 1994, equality is no longer just a dream. It is a goal that is slowly becoming a reality. It is a fire that can only be seen if you look into the eyes of all of those around you, whether they are male or female. They are just like you, because in the end, we are all equal.